Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our in-depth tutorial on how to draw vectors for complete beginners. Now, hopefully if you're on this video, you've already watched part 1, or you've decided that you don't need to because you already know what you're doing. So with that said, what we're going to be learning in this tutorial, this section of the tutorial, is all the different tools you're going to be utilizing while drawing vectors, and color selection, as well as references, and actually beginning to draw our vector, because I'm sure you all really want to get to that and don't want to bother with this early stuff. But it is important, especially if you don't know anything about how to draw in Adobe Illustrator. So starting right off, the two most basic tools we have are our selection tool and the direct selection tool. Now, something really nice that Adobe does for you, you notice when I hover over the selection tool, it has that V in parentheses, and this one, the direct selection tool, has an A in parentheses. Those are the shortcuts for that tool. So V for selection tool and A for direct selection tool. We'll be utilizing shortcuts a lot because it makes the process go much quicker for you, especially when we have to switch back and forth between them so often. So remember those shortcuts, and again, if you ever forget them, it's all you have to do is hover over that tool, and it will remind you. So to show you exactly what the difference between these two selection tools are, I'm going to go ahead and just place down a basic square on our body layer here. So that's going to place down a square. Now, after I place it, I clicked off of it. The selection tool is your most basic tool you're going to be using in Illustrator. Pretty much, again, I keep referencing PowerPoint because it's a pretty simple software that I'm sure many of you have probably already used before. But similar to the selection tool in PowerPoint, in Illustrator, all you do when you click it, it pops up your what are called anchors. These are the square things you see here. Your lines or paths, excuse me, between the anchors and the corners of your square. So pretty much anywhere where you get this hard edge is going to give you an option to change the corner, which we'll go over in a second. But the selection tool, really, all it allows you to do is move the object around whole as the whole thing, and also adjust the height and width of the object, again, the same way you would in any other simple editing software. So you can select the one on the edge here on the right side, and you can adjust the length. Or the top or the bottom is the width, and again the corners is the length and the width at the same time. Very straightforward. I'm probably boring you with that, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the slightly more complicated one, the direct selection tool. And again, I'm going to just click it over here so it's reminding you where it is. Hopefully you're able to find the first two most basic tools, but in case you don't. Alright, so selecting our square again using the direct selection tool, you'll notice that the anchors that you saw here on the top and the sides are not showing up anymore because we're not able to adjust the height and the width anymore. What we're doing is we're adjusting the specific anchors in our object. So clicking once selects our object. Clicking again on one of these squares here, the anchors, you actually will be able to adjust that specific point on your object or your shape. Noticing that when you have it selected, it becomes a solid blue fill, only solid blue because that is the color of our layer that we're working with right now. And the other ones that aren't selected are white or not filled. So clicking and dragging on that anchor we have selected, you can notice that it is adjusting just that anchor and the lines connected to it and nothing else. And the corner, of course, is staying because we're able to adjust that. And I'll explain that in a minute. So again, you can just adjust any kind of anchor you want to make kind of pretty unique shapes out of your objects. Now again, we're not going to be working with shapes too much with our vectors, so before we get too far into that, I'm just going to draw a basic line using the pencil tool here. We won't be using the pencil tool much, but just for example, I'm going to draw this, going to change it to a fill we can actually see instead of white. And I'm going to just bump up our thickness really quick. And again, I'll go over these in more detail, so don't panic if you think I'm going too quickly here. Using the shortcut this time, as I will probably completely in the future here, because I don't like having to go and click on the side. You notice with a curved line, that we have a lot more anchors than we do in our basic shape. With just a straight line, you're only going to get an anchor per each point where the line is changing direction, but with the curved object, you're going to have a lot of anchors because it's changing directions a lot. So also, a new thing you're going to be seeing with a curved object is something called handles. Let me see if I can find one here. So these handles, the lines that come out and end in a little circle here, it's called a handle. Clicking on the handle allows you to adjust the curve of the line on either side of that anchor point. So notice I'm clicking this, it's adjusting the paths on either side of that anchor, and doing that changes the shape dramatically. It looks horrible. Control Z for undo. But that's just so you know, whenever you click on an anchor, make sure you have that specific anchor selected, and you click on that, it's adjusting the paths. Keep in mind, of course, that you can also adjust the paths of that from that point from the anchor on the other side, because they're both connected to the same path. Now, notice how, again, it's changing both paths on either side. Now, sometimes when drawing vectors, you don't want it to do that. To prevent that from happening, you're going to hold in Alt and then click on the handle, and you can adjust just that single path between your two anchors there instead of both paths on either side of the anchor. Alright, we're almost done here with the direct selection tool, so I'm sorry, I know you're probably growing impatient and want to get to the vectors, but one last thing, the corners, the circles here, you see, very clearly different from the handles. Clicking and dragging on this actually allows you to adjust the curve of any given point, and in reality, what it's doing is creating two anchors out of one. So if you notice, I click and drag that, and because I had all the points selected at the same time, it actually adjusted every single corner on this shape instead of just one. You can see that it created an anchor here and an anchor here on each point. So now instead of just 4, we have 8. And then you have a nice smooth curve from between your anchors. Now going over to our shape here, if you only want to adjust a single corner, you can make sure that only that specific anchor is selected. Now we don't get any kind of corners because it's already very smooth and there's no real jagged points for us to smooth out. But I'm going to mess with this so that it gives us that option. Actually, simple way to do it is just going up here. You don't have to worry about this. I'm only going to do this for example. Click on this, convert to solid, and then it'll give us our corner. Now, when adjusting corners, if you want the absolute most smooth curve you can get, you'll just drag this point, this corner selector thing here until you see a red line like that. That means you cannot smooth that curve any farther. Doing any more than that would actually cause it to be inverted. And yeah, so smoothest point possible, you drag until there's a red line. We will be going over that a lot when we're drawing our actual vector here. So those are the two selection tools. Promise we'll breeze through the rest of these a little bit quicker. We'll skip the pen tool for now because that's the one you're going to be using the most. We're going to go right to the eyedropper tool, which is right here. Eyedropper tool. Click that. Now, again, shortcut I that you saw when that popped up there, if you want to switch to it. So I can switch from my direct selection tool, my selection tool, and my eyedropper tool with ease. Now, I don't have anything of different colors for my eyedropper to actually change, so I'm going to go ahead and pop that up. Don't worry about what I'm doing right now. I'll explain in a minute. So let's create a nice cyan kind of color here for our shape. I'm actually just going to copy that. Oop, my bad. And again, I can explain that later, or maybe not at all. Who knows? I'm just going to make this black. Okay, so for example, let's say I want this shape here to be the same color as this shape here. I have simply select this tool, or the shape, excuse me, that I want. Click I. The shape remains selected, as you can see by the anchors. And then I click on my other shape. That's the color I want it to be. And it samples the color from that shape and applies it to the other one. Now, if I didn't have anything selected when I used the eyedropper tool, for example, let's just change this color to green. Alright, so I don't have anything selected now. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool. Notice our color swatch down here. We're going to click on this one, and it changes it from green, which was the last color I used, to the color I just selected. And then using that, opening that up, you can actually get the hex value of that color here. And I will go over colors more in a minute. Alright, I'm going to leave those there for now. Let's go over our ellipse tool. The ellipse tool, again, that I'm not actually going to go over this much. It's just a circle. We'll be using this for the eyes when we get to them. And the shortcut for that is L. So again, that's something you can use quickly. So you don't have to be going and clicking over here on the sidebar all the time. Another tool we're going to be using is the width tool. So again, I'm going to draw another line really quick here. And I'm going to change this, okay, to black. No. It's going to give me trouble. Alright, make this 3-point. The width tool is right here. Shift W is the shortcut for this. Now, using this tool, it really only works on lines, and we will be utilizing this in drawing our vectors. Clicking on a line first, so we have it selected, and then going to your width tool. This is kind of hard to see. Let me actually move this to a different. Let's go with red. I feel like it'll be easier to see. Okay. It's gonna stay yellow. Alright. Anyway, so you can see the each anchor here. When you use the width tool, your line already has a width of 3, which I will go again over in a second. Double clicking creates, it's sort of like an anchor, but it doesn't quite work the same. It's controlling the width of your line from that specific point. So I can change this to example 5, and then the width of the line is going to be 5 at that exact place I made that right there, and it's going to taper out to 3 on either side because that's what the line originally was. That's what its width originally was. Now we can click and drag this to adjust the width. We can click the edges to actually adjust the entire line simultaneously. And again, dragging it along, you can see changes the width, the wide width point we have here, and where it is. So pretty cool, pretty neat tool, and we will learn how to apply that with our vectors. Okay, now, so much to learn, so little time. We're going to go ahead and open up our pen tool and go over what is called the control toolbar up here. If you don't see all this stuff up here with the stroke and 5-point round and so forth, for some reason, if you can't see that, you just go to your window, make sure control is selected right there, and that'll display that. Now, the pen tool is the main tool we're going to be using throughout all of our vector drawings here because it creates the smoothest, most perfect lines, if you will. So, drawing that, to use the pen tool, you can either single click, which just places down a single anchor, and we don't want to be in yellow anymore because you really can't see that against a white background. We'll switch over to body fill. Click, okay. It's a little bit better. So, clicking that places down a single anchor, and you can see the kind of elastic path that's connected to my mouse and the anchor I placed down. I'm creating here just straight lines, and whenever I click down again, it's going to create a new anchor and fill in the path between them to create a shape. And we can actually recreate our square, not perfect square, but that we had before. And now, when placing lines down using the pen tool, I want to zoom in a bit here. When you see that circle come up right next to my pen right there, you can see it showing up. That means you're connecting the path together to another point. So clicking that actually makes it a complete shape. So you can see when I drag this around that it's actually 4 individual anchors and 4 paths in between, like our square was. And it each has, again, our corners like we had before. This corner got a little hokey here. Oh, it's because I accidentally made it curved. And I'm actually going to show you how to do that. So to make a curved path, you click and hold, and you can see how we adjusted the handles earlier using our direct selection tool. This is pretty much just adjusting it as you make the line. So holding this in and releasing on the first point is not necessarily, it's kind of pointless. Usually with the very first anchor you can just click, but after that, clicking and holding creates these curved handles, the curved path, that will allow you to get around some of our most beautiful and curvaceous shapes and get exactly what you want out of your drawing. Because if you scroll up again to what we're drawing here, you can see there's very few just completely straight lines, if any at all. All of them have some kind of slight curve to it. Alright, so that's all the tools we'll be using throughout our vector drawing. Again, there's some other little things you need to know about the pen tool, but we'll deal with that when we get there. So I know you all really want to get started, so we're going to do that. We'll go over color at a later time and changing colors and such. But let's go ahead and delete all this because we don't want it. And we're going to go ahead and start drawing. So it seems our eyes somehow got underneath our tail there. We don't want that. That explains a lot, actually, from before. So, time to start drawing. And we're going to go in the very basics here. We're going to click P, which is our shortcut for our pen tool. You see that little asterisk or the star there. That means we're starting a completely new line. There is a different symbol that can be there at times. And I'll explain what that means later on. So I personally like to start with the ear when drawing vectors, just because that's what I do. You don't have to start there, but I find it the easiest. So to start drawing, applying everything we've learned so far, you simply click once to start a new line. And again, making sure you have the body layer selected. And then we can click on our next point and create our line. We just click and hold to make sure we get that curve and follow it along as best as possible. And I'm going to start slightly above here. Now, the problem with curved lines, as you can see here, I can't quite go back down as sharply as I want to with the curve I have already, because it's trying to make it a smooth curve. But we don't necessarily need that, so what you're going to do is hover over your anchor here, so it says anchor, and you see a little caret tool, or symbol, next to your pen. Click again, and that allows you to start a new line off of your anchor without that previous curve, which is nice. And you're just going to click and drag as best as you can to get that same shape of her ear. And then you can click escape to get off of that, and then shortcut tool V to go back to our regular selection tool. Usually whenever you're done drawing a line, just go back to your regular selection tool. It's the safest. Now again, this point is not what we want. Her ear doesn't look like that. So to change that, you go to your direct selection tool and hover over this. You can click on the anchor that's there, and hey, look, it's this little circle here that allows us to adjust the corners. And we're going to go ahead and drag that down ever so slightly to make the curve of her ear. So hey, look, there you go. You've already drawn her ear. Now, of course, there are some adjustments. It's not quite the right width or anything, but so there are some adjustments that we would have to make. But moving right along, I'm going to draw the inner part of her ear. Deselect that. Okay, now really quick, going over our toolbar here, the control toolbar. When you draw any line, each one has properties to it, which can be found on the control toolbar up here. You have the stroke width, you have the variable width profile, and the brush definition. And we are going to utilize all of these throughout drawing our vectors. And of course, also here, this is the color of the line. But for now, we're just going to use black. That's all we need. So I typically just start with a solid 3-point line for all of my drawings. You can adjust the variable width profile, which you saw us doing with the width tool. Try to say that 10 times fast. Earlier, but they already have some width profiles that come pre-built into Adobe. So, for example, we can see here, I'm going to use the visibility, toggle that off. that her ear tapers off on each end, on the inner part here, and actually on the outside. So we can actually select this using our selection tool and change the variable width profile to width profile 1. And that actually changes her ear that we just drew to pretty much match. And then you can adjust the width to be closer to the actual size. We'll go about 3 for right now. And you can do the same thing with this ear here. Now, we might go back and change this because I don't use this specific width profile anymore. But for beginners, it's going to, I think, suit you guys just fine. So I know all we've drawn so far is the ear, but I've actually taken up quite a bit of your time already just explaining all the tools and so forth. So I think I'm going to end section 2 right here, having learned all our tools and the shortcuts and how they work. And then in our next part of the tutorial, we're going to actually just start drawing our vector. So thanks again for watching this video. I hope you guys learned something out of it. And if not, I hope that you'll go ahead and look forward into the rest of the tutorials and see what I can have to teach you. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great day.